Gosh, thank you, Lindsay. Right, welcome to the panel session. It's a hybrid panel session. We're joined by Dave and Rose, who I'll introduce in a moment, on screen, and Jacy and I here. On your agenda, you'll have Lisa as chairing this, but as I said first thing this morning, Lisa is sadly poorly, so I've inherited her notes and hope to try and be a little bit of chair and a little bit of panelist, and I hope that works. Bear with me. So the panel is very much yours to enjoy, to grill, to probe, however you wish. The fundamental theme of the panel session is why well-being, as a starter. And we are four very different perspectives, I guess, although there are common themes between us. But I guess individually, we probably have somebody who is a great expert around cooperatives, somebody who is a great expert about the social economy, equality, diversity, and inclusion is a heart of one of our panel members' working life, and health is very much part of my own work, I suppose. So I'm going to introduce Rose first. Hi there, Rose. Rose is the CEO of Co-operatives UK, an organisation that works to raise the awareness and growth of the cooperative sector in the UK. It is an organisation that really does walk the talk. It is a network of thousands of cooperatives owned and controlled by their members, who themselves are member-owned organisations, and I'm quoting Lisa here, made me think how pleased our founder, the late John Pierce, would be to know that you're here with us today. Walking the talk was important to John and one of his key messages that guides our work. Rose brings experience and know-how of the creative industries, social enterprise and community action to this role. She has recently launched Co-operatives UK's new 3-year strategy that underpins the desire and commitment to not just communicate clearly what a co-op is, but also why people should choose them to truly transform our society. Loving the vision to build a better world through cooperation. Welcome, Rose.
Thank you.
Indeed, thank you. Jacy, sat next to me. Jacy is the CEO and founder of For Business Sake, a social economy consultancy work service. Her work combines social impact consultancy, workforce well-being with equality and diversity expertise. For example, Jacy helps organisations to recognise and address inequalities in their systems. Recently, she's taken on the role of social economy coordinator at Southwark Local Area Partnership, and her work creating innovative partnerships to ensure the voices of excluded communities are now included in key decision-making processes is transforming how stakeholders are involved in the design and implementation of local services. Jacy is also working towards a professional doctorate focusing on inequalities within the third sector, and we wish you all the very best with that and look forward to hearing your findings. Based in London, I'm delighted to welcome Jacy to Liverpool and to today's event. Welcome, Jacy. Back to our on-screen panellist, Dave Sweeney. Dave has a wealth of experience working in the NHS and local authorities, bringing about transformation and change. He was one of the first fully integrated executive strategic commissioners that spanned CCGs, local authorities, community, voluntary sector, sport and the environment. With his impressive health and public sector knowledge, commissioning expertise and passion for mental well-being and the harnessing of the power of communities, Dave is now lead for Cheshire and Merseyside STP's Sustainability and Transformation Plan, charged with delivering the ambitions of NHS bodies for a transformed health service. Thank you for joining us, Dave. Now I've got to read Lisa's words about me. Bear with me. Okay. As well as chair of the Social Network, I'm the chief executive of the NMC, the Neuro Muscular Centre, a centre for excellence for people and families affected by neuromuscular conditions, and we're recognised as one of the King's Fund's top 100 UK health and wellbeing charities. I'd need to just explain neuromuscular. It's those conditions, about 150 conditions, genetic and inherited conditions that are long-term progressive muscle weakening conditions. Okay. Matthew has led the organisation in demonstrating and reflecting on the impact of its work, integrating social accounting into its way of working for the past 15 years, I hope, undertaking each year a social audit. It's reading NMC's social accounts that show you the positive impact of its work on individuals' health and well-being, and how that can transform and improve the quality of life for people, their families and their carers, the team of staff and volunteers and other local stakeholders too. COVID-19 hit us particularly hard, and the organisation was quick to respond to the needs of the community, transforming all our services to maintain and extend support. A quote which really struck Lisa from the 2020 social accounts was from a young lady who comes to our centre who said, "The NMC done me proud, kept me busy, kept my mind sound." And on that note, let's begin. Okay. I have some seed questions, but you've heard a lot from me. So let's throw it open. And would somebody like to start with the first question to the panel? You're going to force me to read the seed question. Oh no, thank you, Liz.
Okay. 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 It's a question for our colleague from the NHS. How do we get social value into the supply chains of the NHS, especially around the work that goes on in the estates area, but also in other supplies that are purchased?
Do you want me to answer that, Matthew? Do you want me to go first? Can you hear me? Hello.
I can hear Dave. Can you hear me?
Dave.
I can hear you, Rose, but I don't think the room can hear us.
We can hear you now.
Ah, right. Do you want me to attempt that one then, Matthew?
Yes, please, Dave.
Yeah. Okay. It's a great question, and I think those that are pushing social value to be a kind of core component of everything you do is fab and fantastic. And I'm sure there's colleagues on the call that know a lot more about this than I do. What I can tell you is there's a lot of policy driving that question to be kind of a core part of the NHS. So, for example, by 2040, in terms of being carbon, net zero, to be carbon free, as all the trusts and all the guys, we are a 4% polluter, the NHS. would you believe? So it's a big component of my work at the minute. And in that, the supply chain also has to be carbon free by 2045. Now, I know it feels like a long way away, that, but there's big steps. The other policy driver, and something I'd really advise you kind of look into as well, is the anchor organizational work. So if I've sat on many boards, and I'm sure many of you have sat on boards with NEDs, non-exec directors and chairs, and I love the use of ego management. Love it. It works great, because everyone's got an ego, and it's especially kind of round boards, and people want to do really well. People want their organisation to be seen to be doing great stuff. So to become an anchor institute, I will guarantee you, universities, trusts, local authorities, big organisations won't become an anchor institute. Weaving the criteria of becoming an anchor institute is that you put a weighting of at least 10% or 15% in everything you do. From a procurement perspective, is one of the criteria that you'll see. There's no national mandate as yet, but we've woven that in Cheshire and Merseyside, so that if you want to be on that supply chain and you want to be part of something, of an organisation that gives back to our communities, and certainly our more kind of deprived communities, then you're going to have that in your legislation and your way forward. So it sounds a bit kind of policy and not necessarily a moral thing, but it's turning policy into reality. And I have to say, we've had no kickback from this at all. But what you do have to do, and let's kind of go back, and there's the colleague who asked a question who's clearly passionate about this. Sometimes you've got to offer what that means. So the use of apprenticeships and various other things are really good, but actually there's so much more you could do in terms of, looking at the kind of far more kind of diversity in terms of what you do, looking at, putting your, industry, putting the pens down and going painting a scout hut for a day is nice. It's a lovely thing to do. It's not necessarily that sustainable, but putting, pooling money and targeting our NEET kids and kids that education didn't necessarily work for me. Most certainly, I loved school, but it was mostly football and girls. If I'm bluntly honest, that's why I went. You can do tons of stuff. So I think, thinking differently and giving those organisations some ideas about where that social value could go or what they could do around that is probably the key. But policy is pushing it, so it's good news.
Thank you.
Great stuff. Thanks, Dave. Let me just ask all of the panelists, let's get back really onto the theme of well-being. And Rose, can you spend perhaps a couple of minutes telling us, why well-being is an important part of your world and your work, and what's your initial feel about this focus on well-being and measuring it?
Yeah, and I really love the notes and the introduction, and I feel a little bit of an imposter saying that co-ops walk the walk, because I'm very clear on this. You can't rely on your constitution. I imagine I'm talking to preaching to the converted a lot here. I imagine there's co-ops and social enterprises in the room, as well as traditional forms of business, and it's something that I've seen time and time again, where just because you're a social enterprise doesn't mean you're doing it well, doesn't mean you're good at something. And similarly with cooperatives, all cooperatives sign up to the values and principles of cooperation, but do they walk actually? So that's my key point, really, because I don't think, I joined at Co-ops UK over a year ago, and we've got a lot of work to do. And actually, you've always got a lot of work to do in the well-being of your employees in particular. But in cooperatives, it's all about the members. So if you're not a worker co-op, which is the employee, then maybe you're a consumer co-op or a producer co-op, actually you've still got to build in good employment, good well-being for all your staff. So I'm really keen to kind of put that out there, because I have seen it where people rely on the constitutions and expect the wellbeing bit to magically happen because we're all nice people and we're all going to look after each other. And sadly, that's not quite how it pans out in the real world. But in terms of your question and, you know, the whole panel in terms of why wellbeing, you know, in very hardcore business terms, it's good for productivity. You know, it absolutely is good for productivity. And again, it's something you have to work hard at, but it's not a department. It's not something you can, you know, put in one area of the business. It has to be holistically driven through the whole business, and in everything that you do in that eye on or ear on wellbeing constantly throughout it. And I, as well as Co-operatives UK, I'm the founding director of Sharp Futures, which is a creative digital tech business predominantly formed around social mobility and getting diverse young talent into the creative industries. And I was just going to give you a little example of this holistic approach. So because we focus a lot on young people, well, actually, I'll go back to what I thought was the problem. Really engaged young person, also I thought, working in our organisation full of apprentices. But every day at 5 o'clock, like literally 2 seconds past 5, he was out the door. And it used to leave people feeling like, oh, what we were just in the middle of a conversation. Oh, well, like where's that gone, you know? And every time that it happened, then you'd get a little bit of an exodus of the other apprentices as well. And then you'd get this kind of whole, I'm sure you're all experiencing the intergenerational differences, because we really are quite stark at the moment. Lots of tutting and eye rolling at young people, you know, they don't really care, they're not really engaged about this work, or whatever that kind of incorrect assumption was about why this individual would get so stressed and run out of the door. And because, like I say, we work with young people a lot, we were doing a session with you know, our wider membership base, and it was a session on what's causing anxiety, what causes anxiety amongst young people. An entirely different group had put on it meetings running over time. And it was fascinating to unpick why was that, you know, for young people coming into the workplace, meetings running over time, why is that a problem? And the two things that clearly came out was one was transport and how poor transport is. And if you're not out on time, you can possibly miss your last train and all that type of stuff. And the anxiety that causes you running up to a meeting. And then with this particular gentleman that I've referenced, who's Muslim, you know, as a, you know, really you know, wonderful young man who's really engaged in his home life. And, you know, every day at 5:30, he was expected to pick up his nana and take her to the shops, and I had a whole list of things that he had to do at 5:30. So anytime we ran over, you know, the anxiety, you know, that it caused, you know, as it was getting towards the end of the meeting. And this wasn't a wellbeing session at all, it was an entirely different session. And as I say, we spotted it and went, oh my goodness, you know, there's an example. And it was dead simple. All meetings were scheduled to finish by at the latest 4:45. It was pre-pandemic when everyone was in the office the whole time. And that's remained. So now obviously, like, young man, really productive, you know, but was really anxious. And actually, again, we saw an improvement in the way the other apprentices reacted to them kind of not running out the door, because they thought, well, if he's going out the door, I'm going out the door. And it increased productivity as a byproduct. And that's the point really about wellbeing. It's not something that you can just write a strategy for, you know, have a few staff meetings about. It's got to be constantly on your mind. What is causing anxiety amongst my employees? How can I help them to flourish and grow in their role? Hope that's got you thinking.
Oh, Rose, that's a lovely example. Thank you so much for sharing that and your perspective. I'm going to draw in Jacy now and get an angle from her. Thank you.
So just to wrap up and go back between both of those sort of answers there. So with the NHS, we've just recently won a contract with Health Education England, and one of the reasons why we won that contract is because they were specifically ring-fenced. They specifically ring-fenced, I think it was about 100,000, specifically to work with small minoritized organisations. So you know, that was one of the reasons why we were able to get through. And so the work that we're actually doing with Health Education England is actually looking at their paramedics and why it's not diverse. So we're literally looking, it's all white. There's probably less than 2%, if I'm going to be honest, of people from the universities coming in. And they're not understanding why this is happening and why this is not going on. And it's for our role to actually be able to go in there and do that. Now, the fact they've ring-fenced that off gave the opportunity to have that. If it wasn't been fenced off, then we wouldn't, we wouldn't be in that position. So that the NHS and sort of commissioners can kind of look at in doing so. And then in following on from the point about the young person, as we know, the pandemic has disproportionately affected Black and minoritized organisations and people, should I say, not organisations. And using that same analogy, it's that same similar thing, where that young person has, we've all got different anxieties, but the problem with protected characteristics, with Black and minoritized communities, with communities, LGBTQ communities, disability communities, there's that added stress and that addedness. So while we're all sort of sitting around the room going for our own, worries and perils, it's actually weighting down even more so on those protected characteristics, and especially, for the Black minoritized communities that are having to face this as well. So that is why, we need to look at health and well-being within the sector. And I agree with you. I think that, when you talk about, we're a social enterprise, so we're hitting all of that. Even looking at, the sort of like the B Corp standards and looking at the SAN standards and that kind of stuff, there's still inequalities. It was interesting in the morning when you did the sheet, everyone was like happy. And it wasn't me, by the way, but there was this inequality. And then I thought, I didn't, and even for me, I didn't even think of that in that way. But, it really does need to be at the forefront, because, just that anxiety of not, being able to get home, of dealing with those responsibilities. Yes, we all have it, but again, we have to be a little bit more culturally sensitive to the protective characteristics that we also work with in this sector.
Just thank you, Jacy. Just sort of give my own first thoughts about well-being, really, and in the context of the work that I'm involved in. I think it as a lot of our work is about people not feeling alone with their particular condition, but it can translate into a whole load of other aspects of life. And I think the last couple of years have really driven it home to me how important it had been before and how important it is now that people are back meeting in a physical venue, and the strength that people are drawing from the actual contact with other humans. So many people in my world are people who've never met anybody else when they're diagnosed. They perhaps never met anybody else who's got the same condition. So feeling immensely alone, and like I'm the only person in the world that's facing this. And of course, online contact at that point of vulnerability can be really quite damaging and upsetting, because it may paint a particular slanted picture. Whereas what I suppose social accounting and social audit has done for NMC over the years, it's really made us realise that the atmosphere coming into the building is a bit magical, and we don't know where it comes from, we don't know how it happens, but everybody sort of reports that they feel a kind of weight lifted off their shoulders as they come through the door. And I think there's something about well-being and people coming together, whether it's, I have a friend who's setting up welcome hubs for Ukrainian refugees. I live in Shropshire, across the county of Shropshire. And it's just another way of coming at this, that a load of people who feel alone are coming together, hosted in a venue, and drawing strength from no longer being alone. And so too, sort of mental health and well-being focused cafes and that kind of thing. There's one in my local town, Whitchurch, and people go there and they might not want to talk to anybody, but they know they're in a place where they're not being judged, we know they're in a place where people may come over and offer to chat, but won't be offended and will understand if you say, "No, I'm just having a down day, or I have an anxiety, but I'm just enjoying a coffee." So just a bit of a slant from me. Dave, do you want to give a perspective on, you know, what well-being means to you and your work?
Actually, it's good that you're actually having a kind of a session on this, because I was I remember being the mental health promotion lead many moons ago when I was when I was a rookie, and the stuff that we were doing around that, and the best thing that ever came from it, we managed to get hold of the 1 in 4 exhibition. You may remember it was when like Stephen Fry and Alistair Campbell kind of came out, really, didn't they? Started talking about their kind of own problems and anxieties and various other things, and almost kind of normalized the fact that you're going to have crap days. People are going to have and events in their life that kind of are difficult to get over. And since then, I've kind of grown into, I don't suffer fools anymore, and I don't surround myself with negativity. And I think there's a very simple way of, from a wellbeing perspective. I was talking to two women yesterday who just bloody love the jobs, and I was it was so refreshing to sit with somebody and say, "Oh, I love what I'm doing," just like, I really love it. I'm going here and I'm meeting these and I'm meeting there. And it was so refreshing, because I think over the last 2 years, it's kind of, certainly with what we've been through, really dour, and I think respecting people as human beings and understanding you can put whatever kind of policy or procedure or whatever it is, but if you're kind of all right and nice with people and treat people with respect and respect the kind of the diversities, I've got, I've now got a new term. So I'm neurodiverse, which is like, that's all right. That's okay. I have a condition that, as you've just seen, I've just had to get up, and Anne was frightened that the guitars were going to have to speak on my behalf, but I can only sit down for a amount of period and concentrate for a amount of period. And people are dead really nice to me. I've got a gift. I've been, I don't see it as a mental health problem. I've been given a gift. My ADHD and stuff is a gift. But it's also a burden, and it's nice when people are just really cool. I tell you the one thing I will call out though, and I think it does keep coming back. I still have people talking to me about bullying. Still, people do come to me and ask my advice on how I deal with, a pretty horrible individual who's being horrible. Now I know you can wrap it up in people's. My grandma always said, "You've not got any door, there's trouble behind it." And people come at these things with different perspectives, but we've got to call that out. People leave industries and people leave jobs because someone's or a group of people are making their lives miserable. And I think that's still in all our workforce. So if we're truly going to do kind of well-being and expect people to lead flourishing, good lives, then in our own industries, there are people who counter that and actually make people's lives a bit of a misery sometimes. And I have a very, very firm hand on that. And it doesn't happen. It doesn't happen on my watch. And we have kind of strict policies of getting on. And so by having that as a leader, I have such a diverse team now. And from a HR perspective, I've gone away from qualifications are obviously very important, and education is important, and having a training and various other things, but we're kind of employing on passion now. So if you take the environment, for example, you could be, you have loads and loads of letters after name in terms of environmental detail. But if you're really passionate about saving the planet, it kind of comes across far more, and you end up building kind of teams and building infrastructure that it's a bit wacky, you know, a bit wacky, and it's really good fun. And I think the difference is for people, as I say yesterday, I met a lot of digital people yesterday, and it was almost like being in a room of Sheldons. The vast majority of those people were, you know, if you wanted to put a diagnostic on it, were on the spectrum somewhere. I mean, absolutely nerds of the highest order. I had such a laugh, you know, and they're so frank, you know, so frank and so kind of and so straightforward. And one guy says to me, very recently, he says, "Haven't you got a big nose?" I said, "Yeah, I have. Thank you very much. It's been on the front of my face for years." And he said, "No, it's really interesting. You've got to read." And we spent about 5 minutes talking about my bloody nose. You know, it was like in the midst of he was so distracted. I don't know why I've gone down this path, but it just really turns me on. Differences in people and diversity. And if you respect people and are kind and are nice, and I think you can label whatever policy you want over it or wrap it up in any kind of political content or whatever it is. But you know, the fundamental thing is just being nice to other human beings.
I feel we've unleashed you, Dave. Thank you.
You are. Sorry, that was a bit of the nuttiness coming through there. So I do try and keep focused.
We're not going to insist that you now move into a profile position. Should we ask the panel for some practical examples? Oh, yeah, let's take a question first. Hi.
Oh, no, you can do the panel if you want. There's
No, you fire away. It's your event.
Okay. Hi, Dave. Thank you for sharing and being really open about the neurodiversity. And I really wanted to piggyback on what you said, as I am full-blown ADHD, diagnosed late in life. My daughter's ADHD and autistic, and I've got similar patterns of exclusion, being excluded, etc., within, you know, mainstream education services. My role, I'm a project manager for GMCVO, and I work with hundreds of projects across the country, and it fits me as a role because I'm very stimulated by new things that are usually short, and I can get bored, and then I need a new project. So as a project manager, it works really well. There's two things I just wanted to add to what you said, and it was what you said as well about that the aloneness and the greatest burden and the greatest gift of what our differences are. And somewhere along the way, we do find our tribe, but someone's got to open the door for that tribe to be met. And I think I've just found another one of my tribe, Dave, my HHD tribe. And also when we do disclose our differences, for people not to pretend that they know what it is, ask questions. You know, it's easy to say, well, oh, I know such a body who's like that, and they're not like that. That's not how they present it. If you meet one neurodiverse person, you've met one neurodiverse person. If you've met one ADHDer, you've met one. Every single one has different traits. And I just wanted to say, ask questions and learn, and then we can share from the truth, not what people's perspectives and perceptions are. I just wanted to add to that, Dave, because you spoke openly about it.
Well, welcome. I'm very proud to be, very, very proud to be in your tribe. And also, you know, one thing you've got to remember is that you've been given a gift. So use that gift for good. You know, I think it was Spider-Man that said with power comes great accountability, or someone like that.
Well, that'll do.
Yeah, I think it was Spider-Man. It was probably some really posh, great president, but I like the fact that it's Spider-Man. Yeah, brilliant stuff. But you've been given a gift. Never let anybody tell you any different.
Thank you for that. Rose, can I come to you? And could I ask, I'm going to go around the panel and ask this, can you give us an example of a wellbeing project that you've set about? And are you able to tell us how you know whether it worked or not, or to what extent it worked. So a bit of teasing out a bit of how you measure stuff as well, please.
Yeah, and that's why I was talking about earlier the constitution piece, really, because again, the piece that we're doing at the moment at Co-operatives UK, so I'm not going to have the answers yet, unfortunately. I don't know the answers yet. A lot around, obviously, you know, how do you look at the UN sustainable goals in terms of the values and principles? How do you ensure exactly what, you know, we were saying earlier, that when you're working in a cooperative and the structure of the cooperative isn't worker-led, it's other types of member-led, how you get that employee voice into there. So actually, even starting at the point where I think it's really hard as well these days on screens. You know, you're missing a lot of signals on screens. It's hard to pick up a lot of the time. You know, whether, you know, some of the body language that you would normally pick up, lots of intonations that you don't pick up on a screen that you do in real life. So in that context, and like I said, very much, I wouldn't say a pet project of mine, because it's critically important to the whole organisation and everything we do. But because I joined the organisation in a pandemic and had to lead 40 people from a screen and not be able to get to know them in the same way that you would in you know, the previous environment, where you do, you know, walk past someone's desk and they've, you know, got a picture of a cat and you start chatting to them about the pets and all that type of stuff. And that might be, you know, a more, you know, a team member that you don't particularly work with, you know, in your team. And then it'd be really weird, actually, you'd think, to ring them up and say, have you got any pets? So they should talk about your pets. So actually, we started by stimulating some of those, by putting the time in to have those one-to-one conversations with people and trying to underpin and unpick what's going on in wellbeing. And then, you know, again, when you look through all the staff surveys, is that really telling us what we need to know? You know, behind all the information, you know, all the staff surveys when I came in, you know, we've got, you know, like 90% of people are, you know, happy in this organisation. Like, so you start unpicking it, and are they engaged, and are they working well, and is that detail working? So yeah, so I say the project that I'm working on at the moment is even, you know, be interested in people in the room, is how you do that through screens. Like I say, how do you gather that knowledge and understanding in the ways that you normally would when people, like I say, are all around the country now and working on screens? And then how do you plot that to your strategy and to your governance? So I said that's literally what we're unpicking at the moment at Co-operatives UK, on top of a culture piece, on top of a piece, you know, obviously around DEI, and actually I've just restructured the organisation to have a new leadership team, and actually making the leadership team responsible for that. Like I was saying earlier, this is not, you know, a department. This is not one person's job to make sure that culturally everybody's feeling well-being. And we've got all the things in place, like we've got the mental health care lines, and we've got the, you know, you can work from home, and we've got the duvet, we've got all those things in place. But I sense that there's a general kind of people aren't being able to express at the moment. And the reason I kind of said, I don't know yet, we kind of working through it, because it was a not a dissimilar thing way back when I was working in the music industry. And in the music industry, there was a culture, in fact, there still is, you know, particularly around artists and talent, that's quite exploitative. You know, it's not dissimilar in TV and film, because the talent is always, you know, falsely often supported, because actually, you know, they make all the money. If the gig doesn't happen, you know, there's a whole supply chain around that doesn't make it happen. So what you started observing was you kind of create, you know, that's where the divas come from. You kind of create this situation whereby you have a falsely managed situation where it's all about making one person happy and the people around them aren't happy. And I know it's really unique to the music industry, but what we actually did in that process, we brought in, like I said a while ago, we brought in a team of consultants, and we did what aren't often popular in adult. I say it was a while ago. Like, we did the 360 in a very different way, where we got to understand from the artist's perspective and all the people around them what was going on, and you started to realise that there was things that the artist was doing, like say really specific projects, but that were having an impact on the way that, you know, everybody else was reacting around them. And we did a whole intense series of work, and like so on this particular artist, and changed their behaviours. It's really unique and really unusual, but the way we did it again was to run a 360 again. So that was quite crude, and like I said, it was a while ago. It was a very specific situation. But like I say, when you unpick, people don't realise the impact themselves. This particular artist is, you know, we're working on the moment on a music co-op, actually, because it's really well documented in the music business about how poor the well-being is for everybody. But this particular artist had no comprehension at all about how they were presenting and how that was affecting other people. So it was just simple as taking a measure and then looking at that measure afterwards and noticing the difference. But it required a change in behaviour. It required different people getting different levels of support and counselling. But ultimately, there was a big behaviour change. Dramatically, one person made a huge difference in everyone. And I think there's something, the reason I was using that example, there's something in that. When you said earlier, Dave, that there's something in, you know, I'm sure you've all seen it, one person can make the office feel really miserable. And that's why I was using that example, because like Dave, when you were talking about bullying, you've seen that, you know, and then everybody, you can walk in an office and like, if that situation's arising, but again, when I've done a very similar situation, because I've spotted it and understood it, it'll be because, you know, they've maybe got, you know, a learning difficulty and the way it's presented, they're hitting something and they're getting mad, or, you know, they, you know, going through the menopause, or, you know, whatever it is, there's always a reason. And actually, when you go to the person and unpick it, you know, you can change behaviours. Yeah.
Sorry, I'm just conscious of time. I really appreciate that. So, some really good stuff in there, and I liked your sort of employee survey example, really, that, you know, we can lull ourselves so easily into false senses of security. Would you like to give an example of something, you know, how you've measured it? Thank you.
Not quite sure how to measure it, but how to put something in place for it. So one of the programs I work on is the local access program, which I work on with Liz. So I sort of manage the London program. When the funders gave us the money, one of the things that the funders said is that it was very much white-led, and all the different partners that were around the table were all white. So there was no diversity, and it was an issue for the funders. That, you know, they were concerned about the diversity. So interesting, just leading on from what Dave was saying, where he's saying, you know, he's got, you know, a more diverse sort of team. One of the things I set about was ensuring that the management committee was also diverse. So where we had 17 white-led partners, I then condensed that to 10 so that we could try to make it more manageable. And also, I created, while we were kind of doing the governance, I created a user and influencing group. So this funding is specifically earmarked for women and Black and minoritized communities in the London Borough of Southwark in London. So I created that user group so that you know, so that we could get the real voices in there. And there was this thing around the same similar thing, you know, Rose, we were created, and my role came about during the pandemic. And it was that whole thing about, you know, the Black communities were being exploited, the minoritized communities were being exploited because they were just being extracted, information was just being extracted from them. They weren't being compensated for their time, but yet these big sort of funders were coming along and taking their ideas and using it in big conferences and all of that kind of stuff, and then not actually giving it back down to the community in any way. So within the sort of race, you know, Black and minoritized communities, there was this sort of sense of, you know, there's the Young Foundation has done a report, Nothing Without Us, About Us. And there was this whole thing about, you know, yes, they are engaging in us, but they're not really engaging in us in that way. And so that kind of caused a lot of resentment within Black and minoritized organisations. So me setting up this user and influencing group was the safe space. We all heard about this sort of safe space, safe space to have these dialogues. And even though, I think Dave mentioned it, and Liz sort of mentioned it with the neurodiverse, just ask. Culturally, sometimes it's not received to ask. And then there's that whole thing about, what can I say? What can't I say? And, you are in this sort of environment of, how do you address these equality issues and how do you have these safe spaces? And so part of it was using the user and influencing group to have that safe space so that they could actually vent and, express what was going on with them, and then using that information to inform the funders and the leadership committee to be able to, pose the whole thing about why we need to have more of this sort of integration, and why the board needs to also be representative of the community in which it is, in which it's serving. And so it's that kind of that mental well-being is that safe space. So, knowing that, next month, for example, there's going to be a meeting and I can, vent out and say what it is that I'm saying in that space. And then say it in a way that I can actually bring it back to the wider or the leadership community, in a way that's not in an attack or a way to put anybody down or anything like that. It's got nothing to do with that. It's just that there's a cultural intelligence that takes place within the race, within protected characteristics. As you guys just found out, you've got your tribe in that way. But if you've got a senior leadership team that is majoritively, white, for example, then where does that Asian person go to feel safe in terms of, having somebody to understand where it is that they're coming from? And it's, similar to the conversation that you just had a minute ago. You've got, the whole staff is just full of older people. Where does that young person go to have that conversation? To know, that, even to drop their language in the way that they have. So it's about creating those safe spaces, and in a sense, the impact of them, you can hear the impact in them, and it's also that way to just break that dialogue down as well.
Lovely, thank you. I suppose just to share a little bit of an aspect of my work that I think is pertinent to this conversation. A few years ago, I've been doing this job, leading this charity for 16, 17 years, and something that's kind of crept up in my consciousness is how, and forgive me, Helen, because we were talking about this over lunch, so again, how young people living with neuromuscular conditions were suffering from a great deal of depression and lack of ambition, because they weren't feeling that they had any value, and that they didn't feel they had, quite literally, much of a lifespan, so much to live for. And I've worked a lot with clinicians, as well as with families, and with places like children's hospices and all sorts of organisations, to try and unpick why this was. And it's a lot of bits of jigsaw, but ultimately it comes down to a couple of themes. One is a sort of soppiness that oozes from some of that desire to be supportive and desire to give people a great opportunity, but it's really a cotton wooling of young people who just happen to have poor physical strength and characteristics, through to diagnosis conversations with clinicians that start off by saying, I'm really sorry. I'm really sorry you've got this son, almost, or this daughter, and from that point on, a family live in a sort of feeling of being in a tragedy. And so our work has been to address that and to do things with young people that have provided them with opportunities to prove things to themselves, to achieve things and go on and go to university or however you measure success, do a Duke of Edinburgh award scheme or get a job or have a great social life, but things that at the end of the day they can come home and talk about. And we've measured that through our social accounting and in our social audit. Like all these sort of measuring areas, you feel like you're juggling eels, but we've definitely measured our impact, and we definitely know we're on the right track here. And I'd just like to share that element of what we do. It's only one strand, but it's the well-being of those young people. It's not just them; it's their whole families. Because depression was present in all. If any of you are parents, you know how that plays out. If you're not feeling that your offspring are thriving and reaching their potential. So there you go. That's my contribution. Dave, do you have a further words of wisdom for us?
Yeah, just I'll be dead quick, only because I need to get up and run around. So, well, I'm going to put it in two contexts. So, one, I can talk for ages about the kind of the wellbeing services that we've set up, and we've, from a social prescribing perspective, so like my colleague set up and commissioned and some really flourishing kind of social prescribing opportunities and networks. It's really targeted and really made a massive difference in people's lives. And I can give you 1,000,001 stories, but you'll all have them. But I think from a strategic point of view going forward, in terms of where, from an SMI perspective, regeneration. So I've got a really important role and a good opportunity to start making the difference for the staff and for people who work in small to medium enterprises, entrepreneurs, people who want to kind of have the doors open for them and various other things. So we're lobbying really hard now nationally for contracts, because with the ICS, the integrated care systems coming on board, things are starting to change with local authorities and stuff, and looking to at least a minimum of 3 to 5 year contracts. So what you don't have, and I'm sure you've all sadly had to do this in some respect, so you don't get the call on December the 13th that you might not have your contract in March, and then you put all your staff at risk over Christmas, which just is great, isn't it? I mean, that's just what you want over your Christmas dinner, isn't it? And that happens all the time. It's crap, it's bobbins, it's not good leadership, and there's absolutely no need for it. There's no need for it whatsoever. And this isn't about performance managing. That's a stupid contractual rule that someone made up. A 12-year-old, I imagine, that's come out of one of the Oxford universities, wrote it, and had some other idiot signed up to it. So here's the thing. So from my perspective, I'm part of a small team that's lobbying really, really hard nationally, so that people who are making a difference for other people's well-being and keeping people safe in the communities get a chance to actually sustain what they do, promote what they do, encourage staff into that environment, and continue to do what they do. So rather than give you a kind of a long list of stuff that I've kind of done before, that's what I'm doing in the future. I'm really proud to be part of that army, if you like, that kind of those people who were pushing that forward. So please do keep in touch. I'm happy, anybody who wants to get in touch and find out a little bit more about that. It's going to be a big ask, and to standardise that across the country, take some real culture, a real culture shift. But that's where we're going.
Isn't it refreshing to hear from Dave, and to such a senior guy in the NHS with such a refreshing outlook? Thanks ever so much, Dave. Another Dave.
I got a question for you, Matthew.
Have you?
sort of know the answers to this, but I think there's a number of people here perhaps who might even be new to social accounting. We've had an interesting discussion this afternoon. It's been quite broad and picked on different experiences, etc. And to me, it's sort of related to the value and the value that we get by doing the audit.
Yep.
And in a sense, there's similarities because of the makeup of the panel and the way that's run, how it brings out nuances of resource, which the person or the small group of people that are creating the account may not have picked up on. And I just wonder whether you could just relate, because I know you've got personal experience of them.
Lovely. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to talk about that. I think the social audit is such an important, it's a hugely important day in the annual calendar of the Neuromuscular Centre, and an opportunity to get a trained social auditor to come and chair that panel is brilliant. So that's somebody that Sam can point you in the direction of. Our very first social audit panel, which disappeared, was chaired by Liz way back in 2006 or 7, I think. And then you choose 2 or 3 other people to come and be on that panel. So those people, well, I've always taken the view of people that I really would like to influence. So from my organisation and the sorts of things we do, that might be somebody senior in the NHS, or somebody, a clinician maybe, who works in the field of muscular dystrophy, or somebody who, anyway, you know, somebody who I want to influence, but doesn't have a semi-contractual relationship with me already. So not somebody I'm taking funding from, or being not an investor. And exactly as Dave said, during the course of the day, you've got that opportunity to get the perspective from those other people who you're immersing in your analysis of your performance and your impact in the year. And it's, well, one of the big things that came out for us was that we were having a big impact on family members, but we didn't state it as one of our aims and objectives. I'm going to shut up there, because we're going to have to say goodbye to our panelists. Dave's got to go. Dave, thank you so much. Really appreciate your contribution.
It's been lovely. It's lovely to see people smile as well. Keep smiling. It's really refreshing. It's really refreshing. So I apologies. I've got a 2:45 that I've got to honour. So lovely to meet you all. Please do get in touch. Thanks again.
Thanks very much indeed, Dave. Thanks.
Bye.
So just quickly, you know, it draws in elements. I was just saying that family members were people we weren't really focusing our services on, and yet they were telling us they were having great benefit from our work. And so there's a whole constituency, a stakeholder group, whatever you want to call it, of people that we now actively focus on, if you like, and really draw in. So it's a marvellous day. Fantastic recognition for the team as well, because you pull in members of your team, and you know, it's not a grueling scrutiny. It's a nice opportunity to recognise their efforts during the year. So that's just a little promo. We'd better wrap this all up, haven't we? Jacy, would you like to say anything else on the subject of well-being and well-being measures, that kind of thing, by way of some closing comments?
Sure. I think it's just, you know, for me, even the perspective I've just sort of mentioned about, you know, being able to kind of create a safe space and create those safe spaces. And I think just that last little bit would be great for me to actually go through, to actually measure what that has actually meant. So even, you know, looking at using the social audit, and to be able to demonstrate that is definitely something that I will take back and we'll be bringing down to London. I said down. Usually I say yeah.
Usually.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Thank you, Jacy. And Rose, any final thoughts or comments from yourself? We've got to be quick, sorry.
Yeah, no problem. I'd just say that you know, all the cliches are true. You never know what's going on with somebody actually, and we've all got things going on that can affect our mental health and well-being. So just to always look at it from the other point of view, always to be kind, and a plea to all of you and all those social entrepreneurs and public health leaders, look after yourself, you know, put your own oxygen mask on first before you help others, because this sector is renowned for the leaders not looking after their own well-being. So that's a note for you to all think about for the weekend.
Lovely, thanks Rose, that's a great perspective. Not to, I love what you're saying really, between the lines in my head I'm thinking, you don't sheep dip people to give them well-being. It's not what you do to them, is it? It's very much the opportunities that you provide and the in-depth approach to people as individuals. So thanks ever so much indeed. Thank you so much for joining our panel today.
Thank you. Lovely to see you all.
Right, panel done. Tea and coffee.
Tea and coffee. And then
And back at 3.
I'll just say workshop.
Workshops at 3.
where are they? Where are they? Okay, so case studies, which will be Sophie's leading that with Ben and colleagues from Blackburn House who are somewhere around. They'll be downstairs on the second floor in a fourth. No, is that right?
Second floor and fourth.
Second floor.
Fawcett room.
There's a banner outside the door.
There's a big banner, yeah. You missed it.
Hang on, right, okay, we'll need to. And then Wellbeing for Everyone, with the Sustainable Development Goals. Andy is in this end, yeah. And then Karen and Liz, who's now disappeared, but no doubt will be around somewhere, looking at measurement frameworks with Stuart. Oh, I can't see either. Oh, it's over there. Hello, Stuart. We'll be in that end of the room. Is that okay? And we'll move things while you all get your teas and coffees and biscuits and a bit of fresh air on the balcony, I think. It's a bit warm in here now.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.